What is going on, guys? Matt Downs with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports here to give you the edge for this 11-18 NBA slate on DraftKings. Not wait to break it down. This slate tonight is a 6-game NBA slate, and it is completely in shambles. It's all over the place, literally all over the place. We have some pending injury news. We have some solidified injury news that has already changed the values drastically. We have some great pay-up options, but you don't really know until it comes to time of lock. As we saw last night with the Miami Heat getting ruled out right before lock, you're going to need that late swap. So I have a feeling we're in for a very, very interesting slate here for the 6-game NBA slate. I'll give it to you guys right now. And before we jump right into the slate, I want to go over some of the success that we had yesterday. And again, the one pivotal edge to any NBA DFS contest is always having that late swap availability, always being ready to late swap and paying attention to detail, really. And what we did right before lock is we updated all the Miami values, all of our ownerships, our favorite GBP plays. Gave you guys plenty of time to adjust for doing your lineups correctly and gaining an edge over the field. Therefore, making a lot of winners in our DG Fantasy Discord chat. So let's go ahead and take a look here at some of the winners. We had $102 turned into $238. Good winner there. That was a double ups and close GBP finish, close GBP takedown. We had another winner here, $50 for the Spur lock. For Troy, these are all the lineups that he was showing from that earlier takedown. We had $15 turned into $40 here, close GBP takedown. Really big contest selection here. I don't agree with that contest selection, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. $27 turned into $165 there with Nick. We had some double up winners here and some close. Looks like some good GBP success there with Greatness. We had Elite, one of our coaches, also cash here and on FanDuel. We had a double up winner here, $50 from Greatness as well. And we have Spire, $15 winner here with Patrick Beverly. We'll talk about him tonight. What a weird picture there with Patrick Beverly. And last but not least, we have TJ. You guys all know TJ on this channel. Looks like he tied for first place in that very small GBP, $127.50. He ended up on the chalk build. And now let's go over what happened with me last night with my lineups. I always talk about what I did last night, my process, my contest selection, all that good stuff, so that you guys get a better grasp for how you should play these slates. And again, I am a profitable DFS player. I have been over the past 3 years. Did not start out that way. Obviously, the first 2 years that I played just were horrible, and I finally got a light turned on for me, and I finally turned things around. And now I know how to play when it comes down to contest selection and utilizing ownership and double ups and GBPs. So let's now take a look here. I played a 3-max again last night. We'll take a look at those lineups here in a little bit, but this was my double up lineup. So there was a 2-for-2 combo that you should have landed on. TJ landed on the right one. I did not. I landed on Anthony Edwards and Matu as my last pieces. I believe he landed on Mills and Porzingis, who carried slightly higher ownership. I do believe that was the 2-for-2. Regardless, this was my double up lineup. It did not cash. I made the wrong decision there. Looking at ownership projections, it looked like I had the right build, but Anthony Edwards was not the optimal build there with 9.7%. So I did get that wrong. However, it was still a high owned lineup, so I wouldn't have been surprised if I did cash. I ended up missing the cash line there by, let's see how much. So I ended up missing the cash line by, it looks like 13 points. So yeah, that looked like the wrong decision there to go with Anthony Edwards and not Patty Mills as the value option. Fading Porzingis obviously was not beneficial for me. He ended up being 76.7%, but I did make a mistake. I will admit it. I will fully admit that mistake. Let's now go over to my GBPs, because what I did in my GBPs, knowing I didn't have Patty Mills and Porzingis, is I overexposed myself to them in GBPs. But I had a couple one-offs that did burn me. Obviously, a lot of good plays here. I had a lot of fire here. As you guys can see, I landed on Patty Mills and Porzingis. I knew I didn't have him in my double-up, so I would expose him here. This lineup ended up being very chalky. My one-off being D'Lo, who only scored 38 points. My other GBP, which I'll show you here in a second, landed on Anthony Edwards. It was either D'Lo, Anthony Edwards, or another paydown option here with DeAndre Ayton. The combos just didn't work out in my favor. I had a very fantastic build just in general, but Matu obviously screwed me here with 17.5 points, and my low-owned GBP option here with D'Lo did end up hurting me. So it just goes to show you it comes down to lineup construction. I wish I would have had Giannis like I recommended in my video from yesterday in GBPs, because he did break the slate. And then here was my other GBP build. Let's see how I got different here. Like I said, I went with Anthony Edwards, Matu, and it looks like I landed on both D'Lo and Anthony Edwards. So those guys did end up screwing me at lower ownership. The chalk hit pretty hard. If you played right and played well, you should have cashed in double ups and not done so well in GBPs. Regardless, like that being said, I did well in GPPs, and I only ended up losing about $20 on the slate. So last night I lost $20. This night I lost $20, and the whole point of DFS is waiting for that big GPP takedown, and that's all you have to do. You have to manage your bankroll until that happens. And I've gotten 2 big GPP takedowns the last 2 weeks. One in the NFL afternoon slate, and another one in the NBA slate where I took down $500+. So that's been keeping me profitable. I started out, at the beginning of the month with $1,000 in my account. Now it's at 17, and I always start out with $1,000 because I do withdraw. I like to think I'm somewhat smart with my money when it comes to managing my bankroll. But enough jibber jabber here about that slate. Let's now switch over to the NBA 6-game slate. And like I said, this thing is all over the place because we have pending injury news, we have solidified injury news, we have some good plays, we have some horrible plays, ownership that doesn't really make sense, ownership that does make sense. So it's kind of all over the place. And I'm going to break it down here for you. This probably will be a longer than normal video. Let's start out by looking at the injury report here. Golden State Warriors do tip off at 7:30. By the way, just a quick note here. This does tip off at 7:30, not 7. So we have an extra 30 minutes to adjust. We haven't been going live before lock because TJ did start a new job. And he hasn't been able to make it home in time because, again, he's been doing all of his trainings and stuff. So hopefully we have enough time to stream. That's to be determined. I did tweet that he is day-to-day due to time management. So let's go ahead and focus on the injury report. We have Steph Curry, who is questionable. This will shake up the entirety of the slate if he is ruled out, obviously, because he's one of the highest usage players in the NBA and playing at an MVP type caliber level right now. So Iggy out, Klay Thompson out, Wiseman out. I did not touch this roster, didn't crunch numbers until we hear more news on Steph, but if he is ruled out, then yeah, it's gonna shake up the entire slate. With the Cavs, we also have a bit of pending injury news here with Jarrett Allen. If he is ruled out, then yes, it's gonna shake up the Cavs roster. We saw what it did the other night there when Jarrett Allen was ruled out. A lot of these bigs did get extended run. Kevin Love saw extended run, and a lot of the usage did shift around here to the rest of these Cavs. Washington Dinwiddie is ruled out, so that does change up the usage here with the Washington Wizards. We will be paying attention to them here in a little bit. With Miami, Bam is questionable. If he is ruled out, then yes, Deadman shouldn't be in line for another good performance. However, his price tag did come up, so he probably won't draw a majority of the chalk. With the Spurs, same injury report that we're used to seeing. No real interest here in the Spurs. Nothing with Minnesota. And then with the Clippers, we do have a bit of injury news here to pay attention to. Terrence Mann is questionable. If he's ruled out, that's going to change the guard minutes there for the Clippers as we saw last game. Batum is doubtful, so paying attention to that. He probably will not play. I did crunch some numbers here with the Clippers, and I do like some of the plays there for GPPs. The rest of the injury report does look the same for the Clippers. Nothing really more needs to be said about them. Then with Memphis, nothing going on there. With Philly, the exact same injury report that we're used to seeing with Embiid still out. He's going to be out for at least like another couple weeks or so. Ben Simmons, and you guys get the rest of the gang there. With Denver, Will Barton is doubtful, so we do have to pay attention to them because he's been, probable, doubtful, questionable, all over the place the past couple weeks. So now that he is doubtful, I do like some of the plays there with Denver, and I actually love a play there for GPPs. Then last but not least, we do have the Toronto Raptors. Achua, Anobi, questionable, and Boucher. If they are ruled out, then yes, we have to pay attention to the Toronto Raptors, but they are in a very bad matchup versus one of the best defensive teams in the NBA with the Utah Jazz. All right, now let's take a look here at the ownership board, and it does look like Patrick Beverley and Anthony Edwards showing the highest owned on the slate, and they're from the same roster, so that's interesting. Let's actually take a look why, because, well, nobody's ruled out for them, so that's kind of interesting. It just looks like a mispricing. Let's actually take a look. Historically on the season here, Patrick Beverley is averaging 0.91 fantasy points per minute. And also Anthony Edwards averaging 1.08 fantasy points per minute, has the highest usage rate on the team here. And again, this is just looking at this season. So when we take a look at the roster and their price tags, 4.2K here for Patrick Beverley. Doesn't really make sense, 0.91 fantasy points per minute. When you equate that to 29 minutes, you multiply that times 0.91, gives you a 26.39 fantasy point projection and a 6.28 fantasy point per dollar value. So he's just looks like a good overall play on the slate. Nothing more needs to be said. He's playing in starter minutes. He's 4.2K, and it's a pace-up game here versus Spurs. They are the highest, second highest over-under here on the slate. Now, Anthony Edwards, we had a debate here in the early morning in our Discord chat on whether we should be playing Anthony Edwards going forward or not, because $7,700, you would think, for a guy with the heaviest usage on the team in the highest pace game, that would make a lot of sense. He's just not been doing well. He's not living up to the expectations on what we were again expecting here from Anthony Edwards, only averaging 1.08 fantasy points per minute. He is playing a ton of minutes. He has a high usage rate. He kind of reminds me of Cade Cunningham, but just with a higher price tag. It is frustrating. I do think he's a viable option. Again, highest usage guy and the second highest over under. I think he's viable. I just don't think you prioritize him. I don't think the ownership really makes sense. I think it makes sense from a lineup construction perspective, but that's pretty much it. And same exact thing here with D'Lo. D'Lo's averaging 1.08 fantasy points per minute as well, 4.71 point per dollar value. So these guys just are fillers, in my opinion. I do think Patrick Beverley is the automatic lock when you look at it in terms of cash and smaller GPPs. Next on the list here is going to be Jokic at $12,000. We know that Denver is without Barton, Murray, Porter, and Zeke. So when you take those guys off the court and the 103 minutes of sample size, you look at Jokic at a 38.5% usage rate, averaging 1.94 fantasy points per minute. Again, that's over 2.5 games of sample size. Really do like him. His upside is tremendous. He's the only guy scoring the basketball here, and a very good matchup here versus the 76ers without Embiid. That's why he's showing a lot of ownership, and it looks like the builds are landing on Jokic being that pay-up option at the center spot. So he's the most obvious overall play in the slate. I think he's the highest upside in general. And right now we have him pinned for 69.84 points and a 5.82 point per dollar value at a 12K price tag, which is very hard to have that good of a value when you're a pay-up option like that. Let's actually talk about the rest of this roster. Aaron Gordon showing the second most ownership here on this team. I don't really get that ownership just because he isn't that good of a fantasy point per minute player, only averaging 0.71 fantasy points per minute here on the season with those guys off the court. He does play a lot of minutes. I get that, but then the 5.3K price tag, I don't think he's safe. He's going to be kind of all over the place. I'm definitely not prioritizing Aaron Gordon in my cash builds, but if I happen to land on him, yes, he's a viable last piece. Nothing more needs to be said about Aaron Gordon. Jeff Green's also showing some ownership just as a paid-on option, only averaging 0.6 fantasy points per minute with these guys off the court, coming out to a 4.89 point per dollar value, so really not too much upside there, just as a viable last piece in cash. Bones Highland is another guy I want to talk about here, 3.4K. Projected right now at 20 minutes. He's coming off the bench here, 14% ownership, just another last piece in cash, benefiting with these guys off the court, but technically he's only averaging 0.76 fantasy points per minute. Not horrible, not great, just kind of there playing only 20 minutes. I don't think he has real upside here, only projecting him at 15.2 points. But then we have this guy called Monte Morris. He is a fantastic play. He was last slate for GPPs because he was carrying lower ownership. 4.7K, showing 13.3% ownership. He's actually my second favorite cash play from this team because of the minute upside. He's been performing very well this season from a fantasy point per minute perspective, averaging 1.07 fantasy points per minute and averaging 1.1 fantasy points per minute when dating back to last season with these guys off the court. So we know historically he can do it. He can do it this season. He's been doing very well, been shooting very well. Monte Morris, not a bad price tag here at 4.7K with a lot of minutes. I get that he's been shooting very well, so that should regress, but still at a 4.7K price tag, looks like he's a second shooting option here on the team other than Jokic. So I do love Monte Morris here for GPPs, and I assume that TJ will too. Kind of skimming the board here, going down to Raul Neto. He's showing the next in terms of ownership. Let's go to the Washington Wizards. They are without Spencer Dinwiddie, Davis Bertans, Thomas Bryant, and Hachimura. When you take those guys off the court here, we have Raul Neto averaging 0.8 fantasy points per minute and 185 minutes of sample size, which is a decent sample size. Taking a look at the usage board, though, it looks like Bradley Beal is dominating the top here, averaging 1.24 fantasy points per minute. That's no surprise because he is the best player on their team right now. Spencer Dinwiddie is a second option to Bradley Beal, so he does get a slight boost in usage, only averaging 1.24 fantasy points per minute. We'll see how that translates to his price tag. Kyle Kuzma next on the list here, averaging 1.05 fantasy points per minute and 23.4% usage rate. Definitely don't mind him. Let's actually convert this over to a value perspective when looking at their price tags. Going down to Washington, they are playing Miami, so this is going to be a slight pace down spot. Do keep that in mind. However, I do like Raul Neto because he is projected 26 minutes to fill that role for Spencer Dinwiddie. I do like him at 23.1% ownership, and I do prioritize him and Patrick Beverley for my favorite value plays here on the slate. Right now, he's coming out to a 6.5 point per dollar value. The rest of the Washington Wizards really don't pop, like Bradley Beal, sure, in GPPs, but his ownership is a little bit too high for me. He does have the minute upside. It is a bad matchup against the Miami Heat. He's going to have to get up a lot of shots for him to hit his price point. I'm not in love with Bradley Beal. I don't hate him, but I'm probably am avoiding him in cash. Avdija is showing a 5.68 point per dollar value, averaging 0.8 fantasy points per minute, but only projected about 25 minutes here in this contest. But one guy that is flying under the radar is going to be Aaron Holiday, averaging 0.91 fantasy points per minute here with these guys off the court. He is showing a 6.94 point per dollar value, so I do like him in terms of value. I actually like him a little bit more than Raul Neto. It will come down to see who is starting. Aaron Holiday probably is not going to start. Raul Neto is, because again, Raul Neto is the exact sub there for Spencer Dinwiddie. So it does make Aaron Holiday kind of carry lower ownership, fly under the radar, more so than Raul Neto. If Aaron Holiday does start, then Raul Neto is going to be carrying the lower ownership, and I like him as a GPP pivot. But whoever starts for the Washington Wizards is going to be a little bit on the chalky side, and they do make for a great value play. And those are the highest owned guys. Some honorable mentions here are going to be Rudy Gobert, D'Lo, which we already talked about there from the Minnesota picture, and then Derek White is coming down in price tag because he's not been playing very well. He did come back to earth here, did play 31 minutes and did hit that price point last game, so I'm surprised in the price drop there for him. Is a viable option. Jeff Green already talked about. And Paul George at 11K. Let's actually move over to the Clippers because there's some decent options there. Right now, this is taking into consideration that Terrence Mann is playing. I didn't take him off the court, just Nick Batum and the rest of the gang that's been out here for a while. Let's take a look here at the price tags. Zubac at a 5.1K price tag will make for a very good GPP pivot. Projected 28 minutes, is averaging over a fantasy point per minute, is showing 15.9% ownership, so I do like him here at a 6.2 point per dollar value. Reggie Jackson is another guy I love for sheer upside. I do consider him cash viable as well. A 6.5K price tag, and he's been playing the entire game here because he has to. All these guards have been out, especially if Terrence Mann is out. He's averaging 1.08 fantasy points per minute at a 6.5K price tag. I do consider him a safe option. And the exact same thing can be said with Eric Bledsoe. Yeah, Reggie Jackson played 38 minutes last game. And then also Eric Bledsoe playing a decent amount of minutes, especially if Terrence Mann is ruled out. I think both of these guards will be cash viable if he's ruled out, but I do like Reggie Jackson just overall in general. And then I really have no other interest here in these Clippers guys. Terrence Mann's price tag is intriguing if he does play. He is projected for 32 minutes as of right now. Then last but not least, I wanted to see if I had any interest here in the 76ers because we are still without some of the usage monsters, talking about Joel Embiid, and there's really no interest. I do like Tyrese Maxey's upside just in terms of minutes at a 7.1K price tag. This is a little bit of a better matchup than what they had last game. They got absolutely throttled and blown out. They only scored 85 points. I do expect them to score more points. They are projected for 101 points here. So I do like Tyrese Maxey at 3% ownership. And that will pretty much wrap up the breakdown, guys. As of right now, we're pending a lot of injury news, but right now I am prioritizing Pat Bev, Jokic, Neto if he does start, and I'll go ahead and lock in Reggie Jackson as of right now. Those are my favorite overall plays on the slate. And again, if Steph Curry's rolled out, just forget this video, throw it out the window. I'll pin and post in the YouTube comment section below if anything does change and update you guys with my favorite plays. And that will wrap up my video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy this video. If you did, please do hit that subscription button, notification bell, and of course smash that like button for all of our future NBA content. With all that being said, have a great rest of your day, and let's cash.